You know that feeling when you're just swimming in information, just trying to make sense of it all, and you just want some clarity?
Definitely. Information overload is real.
Well, that's exactly what we're tackling today. You flagged this topic as something you were curious about, and honestly, it's a real eye-opener.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
What are we diving into?
We're doing a deep dive into this concept of debanking. Our source material is a recent live stream Q&A from Team Grifasi over on YouTube.
Ah, okay. Team Grifasi.
Yeah, and what really grabbed our attention was how they broke down the difference between just, offering criticism and this other thing they called debanking.
Criticism versus debanking.
Okay, so our mission today is basically to get a clear picture. What is debanking? How's it different from regular criticism? And what are the potential implications? All based on what they discussed in that YouTube session.
Makes sense. And it's interesting it came up in a live Q&A. Usually means people were actively wondering about it.
Exactly. The spark was actually a question right from the live chat. Someone asked, pretty simply, what is the difference between criticism and debanking?
A straightforward question, but sounds like the answer isn't quite so simple.
Not entirely. The way the video unpacked it, well, it shows a really fundamental difference in how information gets handled and maybe what the intention behind it is.
Okay, I'm interested. Let's break it down.
All right. So the video explained criticism is essentially just presenting a different viewpoint. It's an opinion, right? It kind of invites discussion.
Like feedback.
Yeah. And they pointed out it can be constructive, suggesting a better way to do something, or it could be more negative. They use this funny example.
Oh, yeah.
Imagining Evelina commenting on my, let's just say, consistent choice of dark clothes.
Okay. A familiar critique, maybe.
Maybe, but just a straightforward observation, perhaps a nudge towards, I don't know, a brighter shirt. That's criticism.
Right. A contrasting idea. Have you considered beige? Something like that. But not tearing you down.
Exactly. But debanking, now that's where, according to the video, it shifts into totally different territory.
How so?
The key thing seems to be this act of dismantling and then transforming something. It's like taking information, and they said it doesn't matter if it's true or false to begin with.
Okay.
And actively breaking it down piece by piece, almost like taking apart an engine to then rebuild it into a totally new truth, or maybe a new falsehood. It's not just disagreeing, it's like fundamentally reshaping the original thing.
Wow. Okay. That's a much more active, almost aggressive process than just criticism.
Totally. And this is where the example gets really stark. They used Evelina again, but this time illustrating debanking.
It's not about the clothes this time.
Definitely not. In this scenario, the debanking version painted me as some kind of draconian mercenary.
Whoa. Okay. Bit of leap from fashion advice.
Right, saying I'm only in it for personal gain, and even making this wild claim about selling subliminal bodies to these. They called them interference.
Interference. Okay.
And saying I'm not actually helping anyone in sessions. It's a complete character assassination, a total rebuild of who I am and why I do things, not just a comment on my shirt.
Got it. So criticism is commentary. Maybe you should wear blue. Debanking is demolition and reconstruction. You're secretly a mercenary selling weird stuff.
Exactly. That contrast nails the difference they were highlighting.
And that led to talking about professional debanking, people doing this for a living.
Yeah, someone in the chat asked exactly that. Are there websites or organizations that specialize in this?
And what was the answer?
Well, they didn't name specific groups, but the video did suggest that, yes, there are companies out there doing this kind of work.
Interesting. And probably a bit concerning.
For sure. And they immediately pointed out this kind of duality.
Duality, like good and evil debanking.
Sort of. They framed a potential good side as dismantling lies, exposing falsehoods so the truth can emerge.
Okay, like investigative journalism, maybe.
Yeah.
Taking apart a false narrative.
Perhaps, yeah. But then there's the bad side, twisting truth into lies, specifically to destroy someone's reputation. Or a company's.
Right, the deliberate manipulation.
Yeah. And the video really stressed being cautious, thinking about your sources, the motives behind what's being presented.
Makes you want to double-check everything.
Yeah.
It also sounds like this can get quite personal. Did they mention personal experiences?
They did. Evelina actually shared a story about being, as she put it, debunked herself early on.
Oh, really? What happened?
It was about an early investigative session she did. Apparently, there were some technical issues with her Skype backgrounds.
Uh-oh, tech glitches, never good live.
Tell me about it. It made her eyes look unusual on screen, apparently, just a weird visual artifact.
Okay.
But that minor glitch led to comments flooding the chat, people calling her a reptilian, draconian, even possessed.
Wow. over a Skype background issue. That's intense.
Isn't it? It shows how fast a narrative can be twisted online. A simple misunderstanding becomes that.
Yeah, that's not criticism of her work. That's debanking her very being based on a technical fault. Crazy.
Exactly. It wasn't about her insights, just this bizarre interpretation of a visual glitch.
It really highlights the speed and sometimes the sheer irrationality of it online.
For sure. And then the conversation kind of zoomed out, looking at a much bigger example.
Okay, where did they go with it?
They used statements made by Donald Trump about tariffs as an example of potential debanking on a wider stage.
Okay. Politics. How did they frame that? Remember, we're just reporting what the source material said here.
Right, absolutely. The video discussed how Trump allegedly misrepresented the difference between imports and exports. The claim in the video was that he framed this difference as a tariff, which, according to the source, wasn't an accurate representation of the economics involved.
So the video's perspective was that it wasn't just a minor mistake, but potentially a reframing of an economic concept.
That seemed to be the angle, yes.
Right.
They presented it as potentially a fundamental misunderstanding or perhaps a deliberate reshaping of economic terms.
And did they elaborate on the how?
Yeah, this was interesting. The analysis mentioned in the video suggested that the formula supposedly used actually exaggerated the import-export difference. They claimed it inflated it by a factor of 4.
A factor of 4.
Yeah.
So if the real difference was, say, 10.
His calculation, according to this analysis, would present it as 40, a much bigger, more dramatic number.
Okay, so the point being made in the video was that this wasn't just a differing opinion, but a potential manipulation of data to create a different perception.
That's how it seemed to be presented. A significant exaggeration to potentially shift how people understood the economic situation.
And how do they connect this back to debanking specifically?
They drew a parallel to this idea of co-creation, which they apparently discuss in relation to hypnosis sessions.
Co-creation, like building a reality together.
Kind of. The idea that through suggestion and influence, a new reality or perception can be jointly constructed. They suggested this alleged manipulation of economic data could be seen as a form of debanking, actively shaping public understanding, maybe distorting it.
So moving beyond just facts and figures into shaping the meaning or the feeling around those figures.
Exactly. So it's not just about whether a number is right or wrong, but about potentially reshaping economic understanding and maybe influencing policy based on a potentially distorted premise.
That really shows how this concept could operate on a macro level with real-world consequences.
For sure. And they took the analogy even further, connecting it to something they called esoteric interference.
Esoteric interference. Okay, how did that fit in?
Do they imagine like a Trump-like interferer, their words, creating guilt or extracting energy by misrepresenting a situation? Similar to how the alleged tariff misrepresentation might create economic anxiety or certain beliefs.
So using a distorted narrative to influence emotions or energy in a more abstract sense.
Yeah, that seemed to be the idea, like misinformation subtly influencing our beliefs and emotional states, mirroring the more concrete example with the tariffs. It just broadened the scope of what they meant by debanking.
It's a complex idea, definitely. Stretching from personal online comments right up to political discourse and even these more esoteric concepts.
Right. And since it was a live stream, there was audience interaction too, which added some interesting layers.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, there was a moment discussing the Polish equivalent of swallowing something hook, line, and sinker.
A cross-cultural comparison. What was the phrase?
Something like Ikich jak pelikan, swallowing like a pelican. They brought it up when talking about how people might accept what politicians say without much questioning.
Swallowing like a pelican. That's vivid. Shows it's a universal concern, maybe. Accepting information too readily.
Seems like it. And there was also just a quick clarification in the chat about the spelling and meaning of debanking itself, just ensuring everyone was on the same page.
Always important with new or specific terminology. Little details matter.
Definitely. And that led to another audience question. Someone watching live asked if there's anything that protects us from the interference of other energies.
That sounds like it ties into the esoteric interference idea. What was the response?
It was a bit of a teaser, actually. They said it was a more complex topic they'd cover in detail in a special course they were planning.
The classic more in the course answer.
Pretty much. But it did lead them to talk about programs.
Programs, like computer programs.
Sort of, but for people. The idea put forward was that everyone operates based on underlying programs, whether we realize it or not.
Okay, examples.
They used religion as one example. And interestingly, they said even the absence of religion is also a type of program. Basically, these ingrained frameworks shaping our beliefs and actions.
So it's not just external manipulation like debanking, but also our own internal structures influencing how we see things.
Exactly. And crucially, they stressed that not all these programs are bad or limiting.
Ah, okay. So there could be positive ones too.
Yeah. They contrasted negative programs with potentially beneficial ones, using something as simple as a belief in good luck as an example. That kind of internal outlook could positively affect your mindset, right?
Sure, a positive belief system. Makes sense.
Which brings us back to a really core question, one that also came up in the chat. How do you actually tell the difference between deliberate debanking and just, well, the truth?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
If someone is dismantling lies, how do you know they aren't just twisting truth? Especially if they're good at it.
Exactly. It's tricky.
So what did the video suggest? Is there a litmus test?
Simple test, unfortunately. Their response pointed towards needing a deeper understanding. They suggested that really differentiating requires understanding how things actually work against something they apparently cover more in their operator course.
So deeper knowledge is key.
But the main takeaway for everyone, I think, was the need for awareness. Actively verifying information, questioning sources, not just accepting things at face value.
Cultivating that critical thinking muscle.
Precisely. So wrapping this deep dive up, what have we really pulled from this Team Grifasi session?
Well, it seems clear that debanking, as they define it, is way more than just criticism. It's a deliberate dismantling and reshaping of information.
Yeah, a transformation process.
Yeah.
And the goal isn't necessarily accuracy.
Right. And the really key thing is that duality, it can apparently be used to expose falsehoods, but also to create them. That makes it powerful and potentially dangerous.
We saw that in the examples, didn't we? From the personal level, like a Skype incident, right up to the larger political discourse example with the tariffs. It seems to have far-reaching implications.
Absolutely. And it underlines that telling the difference, critique versus beneficial debunking versus malicious debanking, isn't easy.
No, the source material definitely highlighted that complexity. It really requires awareness and that critical thinking we mentioned.
Which leaves a pretty important thought for everyone listening, doesn't it?
I think so. Maybe think about the information you encounter day to day. Are you getting critique, different viewpoints? Or is it sometimes closer to this idea of debanking, a calculated effort to reshape how you see something?
What are those subtle signs? How might realities be getting constructed or co-created around you? It's definitely something worth pondering as we navigate, well, everything that's out there.
A vital question, for sure. Makes you think.